Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. We are an intentionally welcoming congregation, open to people of all backgrounds, races, genders, sexual orientations, and abilities. At UUCA, we encourage people to come for community, find inspiration, and live with purpose together. My name is Christine Hauser, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Today is Sunday, September 18, and whether this is your first time worshiping with us or your regular Sunday routine, we're glad you're here. Today, we have two special events: meeting members of the Board of Trustees and hearing from Bruce Knotts, Director of the UUA's UN office. Bruce will join Reverend CTC as they discuss ways to fight for the inherent worth and dignity of all people and incorporate a proven direction for international social justice work. Bruce yesterday led a workshop on the global perspective of the social justice issues we work on locally. We are grateful that he was able to take the time to be here as he prepares to retire at the end of this month, and we look forward to hearing of his plans for the future. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning's call to worship was written by Richard Gilbert. It is called Life is Always Unfinished Business. In the midst of the whirling day, in the hectic rush to be doing, in the frantic pace of life, pause, stop, let yourself be here for a moment. Catch your breath, relax your body, loosen your grip on life. Consider that our lives are always unfinished business. Imagine that the picture of our being is never quite complete. Allow yourself to breathe in the air of progress. Do not hurry to finish this masterpiece. Do not rush to finish the picture. Do not be impatient to complete a drawing that has not been fully imagined. From beckoning birth to dawning death, we are a people in process. There is always, always more to be done. Do not let the incompleteness weigh on your spirit or despair that imperfection is marking you every day. Do not fear that you are still in the making. Instead, be grateful that the world is yet to be fully created. Instead, give thanks that you are allowed to grow and blossom. Instead, celebrate the power of the incomplete. For our lives are always unfinished business, and that in itself is a good thing. Let us worship together this morning. One of our traditions here at UUCA is to light a candle of compassion. This morning, we continue to seek an end to gun violence and support its victims and their families. We remind our legislators and our public officials that they need to take steps to pass legislation that is meaningful, that is filled with common sense, that will remove guns from the hands of many, many people. We continue to acknowledge the people of Ukraine and send them strength and solidarity as they face the raw brutalities of war. And this community persistently sends love to the LGBTQ+ community. You see, it is our hope that one day the painful experiences of those who are still being deeply mistreated will only be seen in life's rear view window. Our desire is that the prejudice they continue to face will disappear. May we be accepted for who we are. Love ourselves, love one another, and simply love who you love. May it be so.
Good morning. We gather together as a community of memory and hope to celebrate life and its infinite possibilities for love. Would you read with me together? As a symbol of light in every human heart, may our individual sparks meet and merge, bringing both light and warmth to the world.
Well, here we are at the beginning of a new congregational year together, arriving in body and in spirit and virtually, in person and online. We begin with gratitude for our leaders. Now, I wonder if there are folks here, perhaps particularly smaller or younger folks here, who might be able to tell me some examples of leaders in the world around you, like at your school or in your town or in the country. Does anyone have an example of a leader that you can think of? Yes, say it out really loud for me. Joe Biden, yes, President Biden absolutely is a leader in our country, yes. I like that you're on a first name basis with him, that's cool. Joe, yeah, absolutely. Any other leaders? What are the types of people that we see as leaders in our community? Yes.
Sophia Morielli.
Our Director of Music of Transformational Music Ministries. Do you know what's so wonderful? When I envisioned this portion, I thought people would all say like firefighters and teachers, and instead people are saying those among us who are leaders, those serving in our country who are leaders, those here in the congregation. We had a first-time visitor at 9:15 who shared how she was a leader in the Air Force, in the United States Air Force. So I'm so grateful for the leaders among us. Yes, in the back. The governor is a leader. Yes. We have leaders among us and around us. So we also have leaders in this congregation, as we have already heard. And I would like us to take a moment to recognize and to formally install, which means to make promises to them and say, yes, these are our leaders with our Board of Trustees. And so I'd like to invite UUCA's Board of Trustees for 2022-23 to come up onto the chancel, including our elected officers. Jeff is our secretary, and I think that you'll see, give me a thumbs up if it's true, some pictures on the screen of Board of Trustees members who weren't able to be here today. UUCA, these are your elected leaders, brought to you through the hard work of the nominating committee and their own willingness to serve. Together, they are charged with holding the vision of this congregation, with safeguarding its resources, with supporting the work of the ministers and the staff, with providing oversight of my leadership and partnering with me on the work of strategic alignment, and with listening to all of you, the members of this community, as together we shape our work within our walls and in the world. Board and officers, do you take up the work entrusted to you by the members who have elected you into leadership? Will you, to the best of your abilities, seek to live the 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism in this congregation and to govern so that the whole congregation may do the same?
Yes, with a sense of responsibility and with the joy of serving our faith and our congregation, we take up the mantle of service and pledge ourselves to the work of governance and to the care of UUCA.
See, they didn't know that board work also involved unison speaking, which is really quite hard. Members of UUCA, will you support the board and officers in their work, engaging when they seek engagement, supporting their governance through works of ministry, and partnering to support the work of the congregation as a whole? If so, say or type in the chat, "We will." Board board, you are installed. As the board takes their seats, moving toward a year of growth, possibility, and fulfillment of our mission and connection, I want to recognize one other group of leaders here today. We have many in our pews and around us, our amazing staff. But today, I'd like to invite and offer a special blessing for our religious education teachers on our first day of religious education of this new church year. So if you are a teacher of our children or youth, will you please rise and just stay rised for me. Stay up for me. Rise as you're able, body and spirit. In taking on this responsibility, you have committed yourselves to nurturing the spirits of our youngest members. Do you promise now before them and this congregation to do your best to honor them, teach them, and nurture their religious growth as Unitarian Universalists? If so, say, we do. And now, thank you so much, and now, children and young people of the church school, will you rise in body or spirit with me if you would like? Oh, I see you up in the back. Well done. Excellent. There we go. Thank you so much. Do you promise to honor, respect, and nurture these teachers with your hearts and with your minds, and to help teach them in return? If so, say, we do. Excellent. Thank you so much. And, oh, the rest of you aren't getting out of this. Do you, the members of this congregation, promise these teachers and these young people your support, knowing that religion cannot be taught only in a classroom, but must be encouraged in the home and beyond? If so, please say or type, we do. And so we take up the challenge of this good work. May we all have fun and grow and learn and teach together. And I get the special opportunity today to go down to your classes with you and get to have some visits. It's Sunday Fun Day for me. So we will head out together to our classes as Sophia leads our children's blessing song.
Good morning. Our first reading today is Be the Change. After 4 decades of study and writing, Will and Ariel Durant completed a 10-volume story of civilization. I've actually read all 10 volumes, and there's actually a lot of information in there about Unitarianism, so worth searching for. Later, in a thin book entitled The Lessons of History, they offered this observation: history is so indifferently rich that a case for almost any conclusion from it can be made by selecting instances. I once found this notion unsettling. Certainly, I thought history was on the side of the righteous ones, like myself. I reached freely into history's deep pockets to prove my points. I did this with a conviction fearfully similar to those who argue that God is on their side. By now, I agree it's not possible to find objective truth in history. No one can say with complete confidence and honesty that history is on her side. At the same time, those who want to move the world in the direction of equality and lasting harmony must become and learn to think of themselves as forces of history. In a world of clashing and conflicting definitions, it matters tremendously when we declare ourselves willing to be judged as partisans for a particular cause. No one possesses the whole truth or can predict where his actions will lead, but to do nothing is to add one more problem to the troublesome equation. In this regard, being a force of history requires both humility and courage. Mohandas Gandhi was one of the 20th century's most powerful forces of history. He accepted his time and place, religiously practiced the self-reflection in his Hindu tradition, and had the courage to confront the greatest empire on earth with the power of nonviolence. The movement he shaped brought independence to India. Gandhi extracted moral truth from the vast complexities of India's history and presented it as an initiative of nonviolent action by individuals. Be the change you seek, he taught, and a nation and world listened.
Our opening hymn is number 121 in your gray hymnal, We'll Build a Land. Please rise and embody your spirit. Please join me in the spirit of prayer, meditation, and compassion. This morning's prayer was written by Reverend Viola Abbott. She serves at the congregation in Norfolk, Virginia. Source of sources, that which is larger than all of us, she who is in our hearts, around us, and works through us. Still our minds. Let us enter a time of prayer. Let us call forth and hold in our hearts the stories of all who have come before us, the memories of those who are with us today, and the hope for tomorrow and for all of those who come after us. Let us be thankful for this opportunity, for healing, for forgiveness, for reconciliation. Let us remember and never forget what has brought us here today. Let us call upon that light that shines in each of us to give us the strength to walk together into the future, to do the work that is necessary, to do the work that will not end here today. Source of sources, goddess of love, let us have the wisdom to lovingly have the conversations we need to have with each other. Let us be with each other. Let us grow this faith in radical love and radical inclusion. Amen, Asante, and blessed be. When we give generously, we are planting seeds. When those seeds are nourished, they grow to change the world. We are also seeking to manifest our dreams of justice, of equality, and freedom with the gifts that we give to everyone. When we give from the heart, it is an expression of thankfulness for all that we have. Here at UUCA, we share the plate every Sunday. 70% of it goes to an organization with a specific cause. 30% of our plate, it goes back to the congregation so we can do work in the world. Our offering is a concrete example of UUCA's desire to assist organizations, ideas, and groups that mirror our values. In September, UUCA has chosen to share the plate with the Guatemalan Scholarship Partners. The Guatemalan Scholarship Partners support Mayan middle and high school students. The scholarships provide tuition and support, including food, transportation, and related expenses for their education. Students from this program have graduated with degrees in accounting, in business administration, in computer science, and in education. Please help us support these young people with their endeavors. Those who are educated in this program contribute to the leadership of the Mayan community's efforts for social justice and economic advancement. For more information on the program, please go to our website And for those of you here with us this morning, there's a table in Fellowship Hall where you can find out a lot more about the Guatemalan program. There are a number of ways to give. If you choose to use a check, please write on the memo line, donation, share the plate, or go to the website, press that button that says donate, and you'll get all the instructions you need to give us your hard-earned cash. The ushers will now come forward and take an offering. We are blessed with amazing music. Will you please bring the offering forward? Our time and talent and treasure here at UUCA always go back into the community. We are grateful for your gifts this morning. We bless and receive these gifts, opening our hearts to true generosity. Please join me. Let us be grateful when we give, be it time, talent, or treasure. Let us be grateful for our needs and the experience of vulnerability. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts to nurture this congregation. Thank you all. Our second reading this morning is called Voting for Yourself. A friend told me of her entrance into electoral politics when she ran for office in elementary school. One thing she particularly recalled, it was a terrible breach of etiquette to vote for yourself. That was true at my school too. Whether by show of hands or even if it was a secret ballot, it was considered tacky to cast a vote for yourself. The cool kids, they would never do that. This lesson was driven into me with such force that when I became aware of national elections, I wondered, did the candidates running for office vote for themselves? My personal suspicion was that Democrats were too humane to ever do such a thing. But Republicans voted early and voted often. In retrospect, I wonder why that was such a taboo, this voting for yourself. If you go through the effort and risk of putting yourself up for political office, shouldn't you think that you're worth your own vote? Why is it so bad to support yourself so deeply? Well, in school, one reason was the dread of being thought of as stuck up or self-important. Another was our belief that if we really were good enough, people would know it and they would come out and vote for us, so we didn't need to vote for ourselves. We didn't think we had to deal in self-promotion. That was an innocent view of our world, for in growing up, most of us learned that sometimes we've got to vote for ourselves. When no one else will stand up for us, we have to do it ourselves. When we have a belief that no one is adequately articulating or defending, we have to vote for ourselves. When it looks like no one else is voting for us, at least we know we can count on one vote. My friend in elementary school, she lost that election. By what? One vote. One vote. The person that she voted for, they won. Never let yourself lose by that one vote you could have cast for yourself. Always, always remember to vote for yourself.
Good morning. I am Marietta Tanner, your envoy to the Unitarian Universalist Office of the United Nations. It was my pleasure yesterday to meet with our social action groups and talk about our responsibility to be world citizens, to look at the work that we do through a global prism, to understand that it is not enough just to be saving the Chesapeake. We must care for the Nile and Danube as well. Now, we know that our time and energy is limited, but we have an instrument, an institution that can help us as we face global warming and pandemics. This instrument is international, and we shall endeavor to understand how that institution, the United Nations, works for us. We are fortunate this morning to have with us Bruce Knotts, the director of the Unitarian Universalist Office at the United Nations. I have known him for 15 years, all the years that he has served that organization admirably. In a few days, he will be stepping down, so to have him as our speaker at this hour is especially propitious. Bruce received his bachelor and master's degrees in California. Then he served in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia. He was with Raytheon in Saudi Arabia and the World Bank in Somalia, all before joining the State Department in 1984. As a diplomat, he served in multiple nations and has fascinating stories to tell of his experience. He retired for the Foreign Service in 2007 and began his work with UUUN in 2008. His tenure there has been outstanding, bringing UU values through our advisory status with the United Nations to the General Assembly, especially in the area of rights for LGBTQ people and other oppressed groups. He will talk with us today and hopefully bring us closer to the United Nations and to acting upon our sixth principle of building a world community of peace, liberty, and justice for all. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Bruce Knotts.
Well, before I begin my prepared remarks, I have some marching orders here from Marietta Tanner, so I need to attend to that first. She asked me here to tell the audience what the UU at UN has done, and we've done a lot. Just recently, we worked with Religions for Peace to talk about the Second Amendment. A lot of people are buying guns, a lot of white people are buying guns, and they want to defend themselves from whom? And I think the answer is often black and brown people. So, and when you think of the Black Panthers who walked around with guns, people were horrified. But you see the Proud Boys with guns, and maybe not so much. Anyway, we do a lot of stuff. One of the ways we're very effective is that we work with other religions. We're a small denomination. Have you noticed? I mean, we've got about 1,000 or so congregations here in the United States. We would not have a meaningful voice at the United Nations unless we worked with all religions. I'm a trustee in the Parliament of the World's Religions. I'm the co-moderator of Religions for Peace USA. I'm on the board of directors of Churches for Peace in the Middle East. And I want to lift up one of my favorite people at the UN. Her name is Aza Karam. She's the General Secretary or Secretary General of Religions for Peace International. She's formerly at the UN, worked there for years and years and years. She's from Egypt, and she's a Muslim. And she just spoke to the World Conference of Churches in Germany, and she said, I'm a Muslim, and Jesus loves me, and Jesus loves everybody. And it's this, and she said, as churches, you need to understand that. Jesus loves all of us. And this competition between religions, as if we're all football teams, has really got to end. You know, we are all religions have worth and wisdom that we need to pay attention to. And if you don't have enough diversity in your life, go to some places of worship, Hindu temples and mosques and black churches and all kinds of places to find more diversity, because they will teach you, they will teach us how to be diverse. We need to support the UN. The UN is the only organization in the world that can deal globally with problems like the pandemic we've been in. Thank God we have the World Health Organization monitoring that and working on that. Climate change, we're having a conference in Egypt in a couple of months. Only the UN can convene everybody. We have the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty talks, getting the world together to talk about nuclear weapons. It's only the UN that can do this, and there's a lot of resistance in the United States about working globally. We like our own sovereignty, and we like to be alone with things, but we can never solve climate change by ourselves. We can never solve nuclear weapons and get rid of them by ourselves. We can never deal with global pandemics by ourselves. We need to work together, and the UN is the place to do that. And finally, Marietta Tanner is asking me, you need to have a good group here that is dedicated to working with the United Nations and really making a dent in the world. Marietta is your envoy. You can work with her. She's also asking me, what am I going to do in retirement? I'm already having conferences with the board of directors of the International Convocation of UU Women. I'm going to have dinner this coming week with representatives of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and I'm working with individual congregations, and I would be happy to work with this congregation or any congregation to really get a coalition of people within the congregation that will work on these issues. And I hope that takes care of Marietta Tanner's points. I'm now going to move to my prepared remarks. Dear sisters and brothers in faith, I'm delighted to be here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, Virginia. This is one of my favorite congregations. And no, I don't say that to every congregation. So, this is one of my, in the glory days of the UUNO, we hosted fundraiser events here in your room right over there. And we also presented an award to the government of Norway for the outstanding work they do in promoting human rights, especially sexual orientation and gender identity human rights. It took some time to convince the government of Norway that we didn't expect anything in return. We simply wanted to acknowledge the consistent funding and advocacy of the government of Norway in promoting human rights and the inherent worth and dignity of us all. It turned out it was the Norwegian ambassador to the United States who accepted the award here in your congregation. And he mentioned that before starting work on LGBT issues, he started working for women's equality. And the two are very related, and so that was appropriate for him. I have long observed that we need to dismantle many hierarchies: white supremacy, religious nationalism, English language supremacy, and I'm glad you sang that one song in both English and Spanish. Patriarchy and much more. Patriarchy oppresses both women and all of us. It's only by dismantling patriarchy that we can breathe free and be judged only by the content of our character. We are accomplishing a great deal and have done in the past 15 years at the UN. The pandemic has taken its toll, and my dear friend and sister Marietta Tanner has been telling me for years, Bruce, they're diminishing you. How right she is. The UU office at the UN no longer has its physical office near the UN, and much more has been lost, such as the Every Child is Our Child program in Ghana. On my trips to Ghana, I also met with LGBTIQ activists, and I also talked to government leaders and to the American Embassy in Ghana. And we were slowly trying to move Ghana to be a more tolerant nation, but we're not there anymore. And Ghana is about to enact the world's most cruel anti-LGBTIQ law, which seeks to imprison all those who are LGBTQI, and all of their allies. So just speaking in favor of gay rights could get you in prison. This law, and many like it in the United States and around the world, are funded, written, and promoted by religious nationalists, and in many cases that means Christian nationalists. They are gaining ground while we watch and do very little to confront this threat to basic human rights norms. Here in Virginia and elsewhere, trans women will be forced to use men's bathrooms, and trans men will be forced to use women's bathrooms. A similar law here in Virginia in 2005 caused my husband and I to move out of Falls Church to Silver Spring, Maryland, where we felt more secure. I have come to feel I can do more effective advocacy outside the UUA. These last 15 years promoting UU values at the United Nations have been some of the most meaningful years of my life. 11 years ago, the UU office at the United Nations moved under the umbrella of the UUA. It's time now for me to retire from my position at the UUA, giving me time and opportunity to focus my advocacy on issues of concern to me and to work with congregations like this one. I'm simply reimagining what it might look like in the next stage of my career. This is not goodbye. This is just another step on a different path. I look forward to keeping in touch with all of you. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to recall 2 initiatives at the Department of State and 3 initiatives at the UU at UN that I feel are the most significant in the past years. I hope discussing how these achievements were accomplished might provide a guide to us to what we need to do going forward to globalize our advocacy to counter the very aggressive and well-resourced forces of autocratic religious nationalism, which seeks to destroy human rights, democracy, diversity, and inclusion. These are the folks that make it a crime to say gay. They ban books. They won't allow discussion of slavery and the true history of the United States and what was done to indigenous peoples around the world, because telling the truth might disturb some bigot's sense of superiority. I spent 25 years in the U.S. Foreign Service. In my final assignment in the Department of State Bureau of International Organizations, I also served on the board of Gays and Lesbians in Foreign Affairs Agencies, GLIFA for short. And I chaired the Outreach Committee. However, that year, GLIFA was unable to elect a board chair at the time, so as director of the Outreach Committee, a lot of people thought I was the GLIFA chair, even though I wasn't. I won a contested election against another candidate who advised that we were in the middle of the Bush administration and we should keep quiet until a Democratic administration took office. I held the opposite view and said that we should work all the harder in the face of opposition, and I won the election. In February 2005, Black History Month, I invited Keith Boykin to speak to the Department of State. He's a great speaker and former White House staffer in the Clinton administration. Keith is both black and gay. He compared the arguments made against racial integration of the U.S. Armed Forces with arguments against allowing gays and lesbians to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. The arguments against both were identical and remain identical to arguments against allowing women, trans, and non-binary people to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. In all cases, there is no evidence whatsoever that people of color, women, gays, lesbians, trans, and non-binary people are any less able to serve than anyone else. The term that is always used in these debates is something called unit cohesion. The term is never adequately defined. What it really means is that white male soldiers may have trouble working with women, people of color, and people of different sexual orientations and gender identities. It is on this flawed pretext that resistance to diversity and inclusion has been rampant in our military history. In the end, military personnel generally follow orders, and there have been no significant unit cohesion problems in our military's long history of integration. In 2006, I learned that the United States, along with the Islamic Republic of Iran and Russia, were voting against allowing the United Nations consultative status to be granted to LGBTIQ organizations. I talked to my boss and got an unsatisfactory answer. I went up to the chain of command to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and got another unsatisfactory answer, and I said so. Then I was sent to the Assistant Secretary of State for International Organizations, Kristen Silverberg. I thought about this subject and I said, okay, she's a woman, maybe Jewish. What can I do to really impact her? And I went to her office and I talked about the Iranian practice of curative rape, which is what they do. And there, the Iranian government will unleash convicted rapists to rape lesbian women in the hope to cure them of their lesbian feelings. The idea that being raped by men would force them to stop loving women and make them love men is insane. I could see Kristen Silverberg recoil in disgust as I briefed her with these facts. I said that if LGBT organizations were able to obtain UN status, they could highlight these human rights abuses and hopefully stop them. After meeting Kristen Silverberg, she ordered the U.S. mission to the UN to stop voting against consultative status for LGBTIQ organizations. The U.S. didn't start supporting UN status for LGBT organizations until the Obama administration began in 2009, but at least I was able to get the U.S. to stop voting against them. I retired from the Foreign Service when a black Department of State employee, Clarence Winder, very kind, gentle man, he killed himself due to an abusive office director. I spoke at his funeral, and Assistant Secretary of State Kristen Silverberg attended. Our boss did not attend Clarence's funeral, and I felt it was time for me to leave, so I retired in 2007. A lot of people say I flunk retirement. I think I'm flunking it again, but anyway, we'll see. I began my time at the UU at UN meeting with UUA President, then President Reverend Bill Sinkford in Boston. And I said, I hope you don't mind, but I intend to follow a very aggressive LGBT program at the UN. Bill said, if you don't follow such a program, then I will mind. And I felt the wind in my sails. It's that kind of support from the top that empowers dedication and concerted action. And I'm very grateful to Bill Sinkford for that. When I arrived in 2008, the UN was planning a conference in Paris to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The UN planned to discuss the human rights of just about everyone: men, women, Dalits in India, Roma people in Europe, everybody except LGBTIQ plus people. I was told when I said, what about LGBTIQ people? Oh, we'll take that under advisement. I kept asking the question week after week and recruited allies to support me. Finally, I was given the first ever workshop on LGBTIQ issues at any conference like this one when we were in Paris. My workshop in Paris was well attended, including a Swedish diplomat who told me that the European Union planned to present a draft resolution at the UN General Assembly calling for an end to violence and discrimination against people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Later, I was invited to speak at a much larger breakout session by Sister Joan Kirby, who was both a Catholic and Buddhist nun. Ask me about that later. After the speech, a Catholic Monsignor from the Vatican came up to me and he told me he was gay and he supported everything I was doing. There's a lot more people in the Vatican that are gay than you know. When I returned to New York, I worked with many others at the Norwegian mission to the UN to ensure that the UN General Assembly draft resolution would succeed. It did. In 2015, I got a call from the lawyers for the family of Tamir Rice. You remember Tamir was a 12-year-old boy playing alone in a park with a plastic toy gun. Timothy Lohman, a white police officer, drove up to Tamir, shot and killed him with no warning. The lawyer wanted to know if we could host an event at the UN highlighting this police brutality. Another legal colleague said that he knew Harry Belafonte. I said, oh, if you know Harry Belafonte, we're going to have a much bigger event. And it was. We had 500 people in one of the largest rooms at the UN, and the event was a webcast on UN Web TV. I was the moderator of the session, and I said that Harry Belafonte was UN royalty. He thanked me for my warm embrace, he said, and he was magnificent. He talked about fighting the Nazis in World War II and coming home to find the same kind of bigotry here in this country. His mother told him to use his music as a platform to protest and for activism. Alicia Garza from Black Lives Matter was also a featured speaker. High Commissioner for Human Rights and a host of other luminaries spoke at this event. Tamir Rice's parents also spoke. We launched the UN Decade of People of African Descent, and this event has been an enormous success, and the UN Decade of People of African Descent still continues and will until 2025. Finally, I did what I could to help Taiwan become the only nation in Asia to enact legal recognition of same-sex marriage. I was invited to speak at a huge event sponsored by the World League of Freedom and Democracy. I went with my husband, who's African American, by the way, and we met with the President of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and I advocated for same-sex marriage in my speech and in my conversations with the Taiwanese President, Foreign Minister, and others in Taiwan. I talked with LGBTIQ activists in Taiwan. I also spoke with Master Chen Yen, who's the Dharma Master of the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. She's a wonderful woman. She's in her 80s. She founded this organization that is now in 100 countries around the world. I knew Mother Teresa when I was in Calcutta, and Master Chen Yen is another Mother Teresa, just a Buddhist one. And she said to me, she said that I want to stay out of politics, and I don't want you to say that I'm either for or against same-sex marriage. I said, okay, Master, I will not say anything. I said, but can I say that you and your entire organization have been gracious and kind to me and my husband? She said, you can say that. So I did, over and over again. And I said, actions speak louder than words. Over the years, I've met with members of the Taiwan National Assembly, and I met clergy that were for, against, and neutral on the subject of same-sex marriage. The Presbyterian Church in Taiwan is mostly very conservative, unlike the Presbyterians here in America for the most part. They forced a referendum on same-sex marriage, which resulted in a majority of people voting against same-sex marriage. There were demonstrators against me and my husband. People shouted at us and said, "We're not guinea pigs, don't experiment on us." I gave a speech which instantly became front page news on all the major publications in Taiwan. You can Google it, you'll find it. And I said that you cannot vote on people's human rights. The majority will always vote against the minority. And we are all born free and equal in dignity and rights, and these rights cannot be voted on. Later, when the National Assembly debated the same-sex marriage bill, a lot of people, a lot of delegates mentioned the referendum, said, we voted on this, we shouldn't pass same-sex marriage, people don't want it. And other people quoted me and said, Bruce Knott says you can't vote on people's human rights, and it won. They got same-sex marriage, the only country in Asia to have it. Charlie Clemens, the former head of the UU Service Committee, said, Bruce, you were the right person in the right place at the right time. That's my story. In every example that I've given you so far in this talk, when I see an opportunity, I seize it, and when it happens to appear. I network, build support, and do my best to persevere with patience, persistence, and professionalism. Some say, well, since you have this wonderful ability, why don't you advocate for the Rohingyas and the Uyghurs? And I do. But unless you're in the right place, the right person, the right place at the right time, sometimes it's harder to get things done. So it's actually keeping awake, and I'd say all of you can do this too. You just pay attention, keep awake, and be alert to the opportunities to make a difference, because they will come. And when you seize them, even when the time is not right, stay engaged, be ready for the time comes to make history. Together, we can change the world for better. I will never retire this work. Leaving the UUA will free me up to do what I do best when the opportunity presents itself. No one person can ever do this work alone. We all need allies, help, and advisors, and mentors. Let's do that together for each other and create the beloved community. Amen, and blessings to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Our closing hymn this morning is number 348, Guide My Feet. Please rise and embody your spirit. We have had amazing music today. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Leave this place knowing the person to the right of you, the person to the left of you, the person watching on streaming wants to be in relationship with you. Leave this place knowing that every time you make a mistake, you get to begin again. Leave this place knowing, most importantly of all, you are never on this journey of life alone. Leave this place and these people knowing. Amen. Blessed be.